Welcome to Live at Athenry. This evening we're going to cover the whole area of breeding and genetics. This is of interest to every farmer out there. Genetics and breeding makes the sheep more profitable, easier to manage, better animal welfare, and also an area in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, finding sheep that are more efficient. Tonight we're going to talk to Fiona Mcgovern. She's going to talk about the Anzac flock, which is basically a comparison of New Zealand and Irish genetics, and also our portable accumulation chambers, where we're measuring greenhouse gas emissions given off by the various different genotypes. We're going to talk to Anya O'Brien. Anya's going to tell us about her work in looking at the genetics and genomics and how that affects different traits such as lambing difficulty and lamb survival. And lastly, we're going to talk to Eamon Wall from Sheep Ireland, and Eamon is going to tell us about how you, the commercial farmer, can capture data on your farm easily and use that data to make your breeding decisions. Join us in studio. Good evening and welcome to Live at Athenry, brought to you live from our studio here in Athenry. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors, FBD Insurance, who are sponsoring the entire Virtual Sheep Week. As outlined in our intro, tonight we're talking about breeding and genetics, and it's going to take place in the form of a panel discussion, in conjunction with some short video clips which will set the scene for that discussion. You, the viewer, can ask questions of our panelists by typing those questions into the comment box on whichever platform you are viewing on. I will ask the panelists those questions on your behalf. So let's meet our panel. Firstly, Eamon Wall from Sheep Ireland. Eamon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, my name is Eamon Wall. I work part-time with Sheep Ireland, where I lead up the OV Data EIP project, and the rest of my time I'm sheep and suckler farming at home in County Waterford.
Very good. And Dr. Anya O'Brien from Teagasc in Moorpark, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your area of research.
Thanks, Michael. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm based in Moorpark, and most of my research focuses on the genetics of new traits that we're bringing through, so something like the health traits. And I also look at genomics and the added benefits of genomics as well.
Okay, and last but not least, my colleague, Dr. Fiona Mcgovern, based here in Teagasc in Athenry. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Mcgovern. I'm a research officer based here at Teagasc Athenry. To date, my research has focused on the impact of genetics on production performance through the Anzac flock. We are now looking at measuring methane from sheep production systems and also some efficiency traits like feed intake from sheep systems as well.
Very good, very good. You're all very welcome. So let's get tonight's proceedings underway. Recently, we met up with Tomás O'Leary in Kerry. Tomás is a participant in the Teagasc Better Sheep program for the last 8 years. Let's see what Tomás had to say.
So I've 320 ewes. That's including 60 thereabouts ewe lambs every year. So I breed the ewe lambs the first year, so I kind of include them in the total number. The main block of mature ewes, they're put in lamb to Belclare, Suffolk, Texel. With the ewe lambs, it's different. They're solely put in lamb to Charley. I don't keep any replacements from them. I use all 5-star rams. Since I joined the sheep program, it's single-star mating, so that you know the parentage of obviously the mother and the father. But in the last 2 years, I've been using DNA tagging, so I'm able to use multiple rams in the one group. That has its own benefits. The major one being you don't have to have 7 or 8 different groups of sheep during mating. Yeah, well, the preparation for mating really starts at weaning. You see the ewes, handle the ewes at weaning, see what condition they're in. You know, they're put in a strict enough tight regime for a week, 10 days, just to dry them off. But that's when your breeding program starts. You've got to build up those ewes to a sufficient body condition score for mating, and you have to, 8-10 weeks out, that's when you have to start that. There's no good thinking about that 4 weeks, and if you have a thin ewe, she's not going to make up what she has to make up in a month. At scanning time, even though I have a very prolific flock, you have to do everything together. You have to have the breeding right, but you also have to have the condition score right. So my condition score was slightly back last year. I scanned 2 last year, which is still on a national basis a good scan, but I would be scanning here up to 2.3. And my view is if you don't have the lambs at scanning, you won't have them for sale. So I like to have multiple births. I suppose the reason that I'm breeding ewe lambs is that I've always done it is from a lack of knowledge as such, and that when I got into sheep, I was probably in my 20s, I'd say. I didn't know really any sheep farmers at the time. I bought ewe lambs. I thought that's what everyone did, and I bred ewe lambs, and I've continued to do that to this day. Tweaked it slightly. I think the biggest thing for that is to have the lamb in the right condition and the right weight at breeding time. Once you have that, everything pretty much falls into place. Have a proper feeding plan over the winter. At scanning time, you scan them, you divide them up into singles and doubles, and you feed accordingly. They lamb 2 weeks. They start lambing 2 weeks after the main group of ewes. So the fact that it is a split farm, at that stage, all the mature ewes are back in the out farm, and subsequently a lot of the ewe lambs, they lamb away themselves, no problems. When I come to them, they're often lambed, and the lambs are up and sucking. I find it's not any big issue at all breeding ewe lambs. The management of the ewe lambs would be different to the mature ewes. The litter size from the ewe lamb flock would be in the region of 1.6, 1.7. It was 1.7 last year. Not a big issue. Probably don't like to see triplets in the ewe lamb flock, but twins wouldn't be any problem really.
Okay, so let's start off with you, Eamon. We heard how Tomas is benefiting from performance recording his flock. What level of performance recording is going on in Ireland at the moment?
Yeah, so among commercial flocks, Michael, flocks that are doing it to the same level, I guess, as we've seen Tomas is doing it there, that number is probably small. Ram breeders in the ram breeder sector, a lot of ram breeders are performance recording to an intensive level, but at a commercial level, to the same level as that Tomas is doing, we're at small numbers. But really, the reality is that all flocks performance record to some level. For most flocks, maybe that might mean the use of rattle marks. Tomas alluded to in the video that rattle marks can be, unreliable, and they're useful to the point of shearing, perhaps, and you're back to square one. Then all your valuable marks are lost at that point. But probably a step up from that, and a system which a lot of farmers are using to great effect is the use of management tags in their ewes. So where issues are identified at any point throughout the year, there's a batch of management tags available on the farm, and they just pop it into the ear of the animal. And whether it's different color tags for different issues, or whether it's pre-printed tags, all the tag manufacturers now at this point will print any text you want on management tags, and they can be used to great effect to identify ewes. And the benefit of that is it's a permanent marker, and it's a good visual marker. So when it comes to maybe post-weaning, you can separate those ewes and mark them for culling, or feed them for culling, or whatever needs to be done. Probably the step up from that, or the honours level, is what Tomas is doing, where there's individual records being collected on every ewe in the flock. We've come across lots of farmers down through the years who had absolutely amazing records in notebooks and doing it pen and paper. Unfortunately, those flocks, all of them never really made full use of the data. And the reason was because it was locked in that notebook, and to extract information out of it in a usable manner it's impossible, really. Since 2010 and the introduction of EID into the breeding flock, and now it's compulsory across all lambs, there's a massive opportunity now for all flocks to make use of EID and to use systems like Tomas is using there. So whether it be a basic reader or a reader that links up with a software package, that's where huge benefit can be got out of recording data, because that software will translate the data into a usable format and nice, easy, simple reports that you can use to make selection decisions or culling decisions at key points in the year.
Yeah, so lots of people are recording, really. They just maybe even don't even know they're doing it.
Yeah, and I suppose performance recording is a formal term, and maybe it's an off-putting term. But look, probably every flock is doing it to some extent, and there's huge scope, and there's benefit to all levels of recording.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So Fiona, you're doing a lot of performance recording in Athenry, lots of different flocks over there. You're capturing lots of data. What kind of investment is required for someone to performance record their flock?
Yeah, so I suppose if a farmer wants to start performance recording, initially the biggest investment is going to be the time from the farmer, but by culling out problem animals and holding on to your most productive animals, you'll reap the rewards of this quite quickly. If you do want to go down the route of EID recording, as Eamon suggested, so there are basic recording software packages that you can purchase. So the most basic EID reader is probably about €250. You can build this right up to what we saw Tomas using there in the video. So an extensive recording package will be about €1,500 to €2,000. I should say that there are TAMS grants available from the Department of Agriculture if that is the way you would like to go. Alternatively, if you'd like to join Sheep Ireland, they have a free recording app. So you can download it onto your phone or your tablet, and it makes recording in the field really easy and straightforward for anybody.
Okay, yeah, very good. So, Eamon, if I come back to you on that, what other mechanisms are available to the commercial sheep farmers to improve genetics within their flock? Say somebody who says, okay, look, I'm not at the stage where I want to do that type of, recording EID or buying software. What's there for those? How can these people improve their genetics and performance record?
Yeah, so look, there's huge scope for those flocks that aren't interested in doing that level of recording within their own flock. There's huge scope for them to still improve their genetics, and that's via the animals that they're bringing into their flock. And look, the ram is probably the most important animal. So look, every year farmers go out and purchase rams. It's key that you try and use the information available for the rams you're purchasing to send your flock in the right direction, because they are the future of your flock. And if you're retaining replacements from rams, they're the next generation of your flock. And look, you can send your flock in the wrong direction or a positive direction. The information that we're providing through the Eurostar indexes is the way to identify the best possible direction for your flock. So this is collecting data from pedigree breeders all over Ireland. It's combining that data and it's converting it into indexes which identify the best performers within each breed and across all breeds. So look, where we see, and the flocks that are engaged with Eurostar indexes and consistently using 4- and 5-star rams, they're reaping the benefits and they're sending their flock consistently in a positive direction. And when we look at the national population of pedigree rams and look at the trend, I suppose, of the genetic trend across the key indexes, the terminal and the replacement index that we publish, those trends are in a significant positive direction. And this is as a result of good decisions being made by ram breeders all over Ireland. So when each ram breeder is mating their pedigree O's each year, they're making a conscious decision to mate with 4- and 5-star rams. So, it's an ever-growing, it's like a snowball effect. We can continue to make, via these ram breeders, we can continue to make positive gain each year. And by commercial farmers then buying 4- and 5-star rams from these ram breeders, they too can make gain.
Okay. Oh, now I might bring you in at this stage. Look, Tomas mentioned that performance recording allows him to make an informed decision on his farm. What advice would you give farmers who are interested in performance recording?
So I suppose the first port to call then would be to maybe contact Sheep Ireland or visit their webpage at sheep.ie. And Sheep Ireland house the national database for the Irish sheep. So they really are the pros of performance recording, and they can point you in the direction of what would be the most appropriate one for your flock. So whether it be recording on the Sheep app or maybe using some of the software that Fiona mentioned earlier. I suppose from a practical point of view, you kind of want to start simple. Kind of if you go head first into it, you might kind of, make mistakes, or you might find, things that you weren't expecting. So even, for example, if you were to get mastitis at lambing time, if you just put a cull tag in her ear, at least then you'll know that at weaning or, it's time for her to go. Like Eamon said earlier, putting a rattle mark or a spray mark on a ewe at lambing time, it's going to be gone after shearing. And I suppose while you want to identify your worst performing ewes, you also want to identify your best performing ewes. So ideally you want to be identifying those ewes that, lamb 2 lambs every year and rear them, bring them to a good weaning weight. And you want to identify her as well, so that you can, keep your replacements from her to improve the flock as you go on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So look, I think we've a question here that's after coming in. So Frank asks, what advantage does Eamon think there is in performance recording flocks, either commercially or pedigree?
Yeah, so look, at every level of performance recording, there's gains to be made, you know, by culling out the worst performers and by promoting the better performers. I suppose the key is, you know, it's one thing to, I suppose, you know, make a culling decision based on a yo. What Teagasc is doing is probably taking it another level by matching the lamb to that female, to that yo. And when it comes around to Teagasc making that breed, that selection, or the yo lamb selection, he can look at the dam's record as well, and perhaps, you know, make a decision not to retain the yo lamb from that dam that had the issue. So it's another level on, I suppose. For pedigree ram breeding, it's crucial that as many pedigree ram breeders get involved in performance recording as possible, because, you know, from that small cohort of breeders, we can make massive gain, and that can translate down or trickle down across, you know, into all commercial sheep flocks.
Just, I mean, while we're on that, what percentage of the national flock are performance recorded, and where can a farmer find these rams if a farmer is interested in buying one of those?
Yeah, so look, there's still huge scope to improve that. About 40% of our rams annually are from formal breed societies. Of that 40%, the vast majority now are performance recording at this stage. But there is huge scope to increase that 40%. In terms of finding these rams, it's quite easy to find them. The Sheep Ireland website, sheep.ie, www.sheep.ie, has a search functionality, a breeder search and a ram search. So you can search for breeders in your locality or rams in your locality. And there's different search criteria. So for whatever index you're interested in, or whatever trait you want to improve it in your flock, you can select based on those traits, and it'll give you a list of rams or a list of breeders in your area that you can contact and find those rams.
Yeah, okay. And is there a hard document on
there is, yeah, annually we produce a directory of Lamb Plus breeders, and it's a guide as well. It contains a lot of information about the indexes. And for farmers that want to maybe get that posted out to them, this year we posted out 15,000 copies of it. So there's a tick box on the annual sheep census form that's sent out by the Department of Agriculture. And if farmers tick that box, so that'll be coming out in the next couple of months. So there's a box for Sheep Ireland contact. If you tick that box, you'll be on our list and you'll receive a copy in the post.
Okay, very good. Very good. Look, at just another reminder to our viewers on your online platforms. If you want to ask a question of the audience, you can do that by inserting the question in the comment box, and my colleague Damien Costello will send it through to me here on this trusty little iPad, and I'll ask the panel the question on your behalf. So that brings us on to our next video. Again, we're going down to Kerry, to Tomas O'Leary, and we're going to get his take on performance recording.
So yeah, I've been recording data now for a long number of years. I joined the Better Sheep program, I suppose maybe 6 years ago, and it was a year or two before that I had just kind of started. I had bought a farm software program and bought a handheld, so I had the O's up on that, and I was getting you know, some benefit, some data from it. But it was really when I joined the sheep program that I really started recording, getting value from the data that I was collecting. And I suppose the help that they gave on that was instrumental really in that. Like, some of the main benefits of recording and capturing data is you know, linking the lamb to the yo, so that any problems with the yo can be linked back to the young stock again. And if the mother is a persistent problem for either mastitis or lameness or whatever, you can link it there to the lamb. You know, it's fine, you'd see the yo at lambing and you'd say she has a problem, and you'll say, I'll remember that now. But if you don't record it, and some good way of recording it, that it's easy to retrieve again, in 6 months' time when you're picking out your yo lambs, you know, that information is long gone, unless you have some dedicated way of recording that data. Initially, I would have thought tagging lambs as a day old would be something, you know, that you couldn't do. When it was suggested to me when I joined the sheep program that was one of the things that would be necessary, you know, I went with it obviously, but I was skeptical as to, you know, how easy that would be. But as it turned out, it's no problem to the lamb, and the retention rate is practically 100%. There's no issues whatsoever. Another thing with the EID tagging is when it comes, well, first of all, at lambing time. So if a yo has a problem, you scan her. She's scanned for numerous things, but one of the things is if she has an issue, problem, no matter what it is, mastitis, it could be large, perhaps, you know, poor mothering, whatever. So when it comes then to at weaning time, those ewes are all scanned again, and you can set up an alert at the time of the issue at lambing. So the handheld will give you a double beep, so you know straight away, and it'll tell you on the screen what that issue is. So you can put a line in her if she's fat at that stage, she can be sent away straight away, or if she needs feeding or whatever, she can be put into a separate group, and the information is there. Whereas, you could put a red mark on her pole or something at that point and say that, well, a red mark means to cull, but she's shorn in the meantime, or whatever. That could be something that's gone. So with the EID tagging, it's foolproof. That the information is there, as I said before. You just scan a sheep and you'll see it'll come up if there's a problem or whatever, and you can make decisions there and then in the yard, and they're informed decisions, which is more important than just a decision. EID tagging and all the other technologies that are used, they're great. But you've got to think, why are you doing it? What's the final outcome of it? And obviously, it's the gross margin is the big thing. Since I've joined the Better Sheep program, my gross margin would have almost doubled from what it was before I joined the program. And it's down to a numerous lot of factors, grassland management, paddock systems, breeding policy. But EID tagging is a part of that, and is a good, a good part of it as well, to the final picture.
Okay, so Tomas mentioned in the video that he was recording traits such as lamb vigor and ewe mothering ability. So I might ask Anya to come in on this. Why are these traits important?
Yeah, so we all know that lambing is definitely by far the busiest time on sheep flocks. And if we look at that, some of the data that we have collected, lambing actually lambing accounts for over 25% of the data or of the labour required throughout the year. And that 25% is more than the labour required at weaning, at mating and at shearing combined. So it really makes up a really big percentage. We all have had those ewes that lamb down and that just have no interest in her lambs, and we spend a lot of time then encouraging her, trying to get the lambs to suckle. And if we can reduce the time spent per animal by breeding these animals that have got better mothering ability, they can take care better for their own lambs, and lambs that are quicker to stand up, quicker to suckle, and quicker to get colostrum in there, because we all know how important that is. But then surely that's going to reduce the labour requirement on the farm.
Okay, and is it possible to improve these traits through breeding?
So yeah, so this is some of the work that I've been doing recently. And yes, it is possible to improve through breeding. So if we look at something like lamb vigor, that's scored on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is very, very poor and 5 is very, very good. So 1 means, that lamb is really, really slow to get up. It's taking more than an hour. And, we all know how important that first hour window is for getting colostrum in. So if we then look at the sire prevalence of some of the poor lamb vigor in these in the offspring, you can see that on the graph that you've now got on your screen, if we look at this poor lamb vigor score, so scores 1, 2, or 3, meaning lambs that take at least 30 minutes to stand up. So if you look along the bottom of the graph, it's the prevalence of lamb vigor, of poor lamb vigor within the progeny. Along the side is the number of sires. Now, it's important to note that within this graph, we have over 309 sires included. Each of these sires has over 30 progeny, and those progeny are present in at least 2 flocks, so we can take the management factors out of it. And if you look on your screen at the left-hand side, you can see that there's about 12 sires there where all of their lambs were up and standing and seeking to suckle within 30 minutes. But on the flip side of that, you can see that, there is one ram there where all of his progeny, nearly all of his progeny, 90%, took more than 30 minutes to stand up and to start suckling. And, those are possibly the lambs where we would have to intervene, we would have to encourage to suckle, and more time spent. And a similar thing is mothering ability. So, poor mothering ability is score 1, 2, or 3. Again, it's the same as lamb vigor, where 1 is very, very poor score and 5 is a very, very good score. And here you can see again, so it's a similar graph as you've previously seen. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's kind of 2 or 3 rams there where all of their daughters have shown really, really good mothering ability, meaning that we don't need to intervene, we don't need to waste time there. But on the flip side, again, you can see there's one ram up there where 60% of his daughters had a really poor mothering ability. So these are, ewes that were stepping back from their lambs, maybe weren't allowing them to suckle and weren't encouraging them to stand up and suckle. So if we look at that, you can see there's a huge spread, a huge difference in the sire prevalence, both lamb vigor and mothering ability. And if we bring it back to the heritability, which is, the differences that we see that are due to genetics. So for lamb vigor, 41% of the difference we see in lamb vigor is due to genetics. And that's a much bigger figure than I expected, but it just shows you how much that we can, by selecting for animals that produce lambs that get up quicker, we can make genetic improvement. The same figure for that is mothering ability. It's 6%. It's a little bit lower, but it still, gives us scope to improve these things with genetics.
Okay. Maybe if I come in there and bring you into the conversation, Fiona, are you recording these traits in the Anzac flock? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so as part of the suite of traits that we record at lambing every year, Michael, we're recording the lambing difficulty of the ewe, we're recording the vigour of her lambs, and we're recording the ewe mothering ability. So we're judging, as Anya said, how long it takes that ewe to bond with her lambs. Is she following them when we're bringing her to individual lambing pen? Is she allowing them to suckle freely at their own will? And, how much time effectively that ewe is taking up after lambing.
Okay, and are you seeing differences between the various different lines that you have?
Yeah, so when we looked at it, we grouped all of our high genetic merit animals together and all of our low genetic merit animals together. And interestingly, we're seeing that the low genetic merit ewes have poorer mothering ability. So they're actually taking up more of our time at lambing. And as Anya said, it's the busiest time of the year on a sheep farm. And it really is the time of year that, you just don't have extra time, particularly if it's the middle of the night. We all know how that feels when you're wrecked and you want to go back to bed, when you have ewes that won't let lambs suckle or that need some extra attention.
Okay, maybe if I bring you in here at this stage, Eamon. So look, we've heard that Tomás was using DNA to identify the sires of his lambs. Can you tell us a little bit more about what he's doing here?
Yeah, so I suppose it's a novel enough, system in that it's Tomás is part of the Ovidata EIP project. What this project is endeavouring to do, it's investigating, the role for DNA and genomics in commercial recording. What it does, or what it has the ability to do, is to assign parentage to lambs by just using DNA. So we DNA sample all the ewes, we DNA sample all the rams, and then we DNA sample, or Tomás DNA samples the lambs at birth. So there's a DNA tag built into the department tag that Tomás uses in his newborn lambs. That takes a little punch from the ear, that's sent to the lab, and we can then bounce that lamb DNA from our database of genotypes of the ewes and sires, and we can get a positive match to both the dam and the sire, and we can assign parentage based on that. What that enables us to do then is to provide genetic evaluations for Tomás's flock and use the information that he's collecting on the farm to build those genetic evaluations. All that information then feeds back into the national database as well. So if there's sires being used on Tomás's farm that are related to pedigree ram breeders around Ireland, Tomás's data feeds back into those ram breeders' genetic evaluations as well. We're the first country in the Northern Hemisphere to launch genomic crossbreed evaluations. So it was this year we launched those evaluations. So what genomics does, I suppose, in essence, is it offers two major benefits. It can assign parentage, or it can prove parentage. So in the pedigree ram scene, we can guarantee that the parentage is correct. If it's incorrect, we can actually predict the correct sire or dam if we have the genotype for that correct sire or dam. So at the minute, breed societies are working hard to collect DNA for all the sires being used in their flock books. We're also, a lot of breeders are starting to genotype their pedigree females as well. So that's a very positive step for the Irish industry, or for commercial farmers buying these rams. And then the other benefit of genomics is that it considerably increases the accuracy of the genetic evaluations. So the big frustration is when genetic valuations move. So we buy a 5-star today and it drops to a 4-star in a couple of weeks when more data flows into the system. And that is a big frustration. but with increasing accuracy, it will reduce the potential for that to happen. And we see with genomics, depending on the breed, it varies slightly, and it varies slightly across traits, but in the region of 15 to 20% is the bounce in accuracy we're getting when an animal is genotyped. So it's a considerable boost.
Yeah, and what's that, if you wanted to relate that back to say, a ram lamb well linked, compared to how many progeny would a ram lamb need to have on the ground before he'd get that type of a boost from a 15-20% increase in accuracy?
Look, it equates to approximately 15 or 20 performance recorded progeny on the ground. So, it kind of skips that step. Now, look, performance recording will still always be important. Sometimes the message is lost in translation that DNA and genomics will, eradicate the need to performance record. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a kind of the icing on the cake, really. So, but the hard work still needs to happen on the ground. We still need to wear lambs and record all that information at lambing and build that information. So we'll never be able to escape that. But it complements that, and it
kind of jumps a year nearly, doesn't it?
It does.
Or a bit of a year anyway for you in terms of. I think we have a question actually on that particular area, Eamon. So I'll just stay with you on that there now. Frank asked, what advantage does Eamon think there is in performance recording flocks, either commercial or pedigree? I think you may have probably answered a bit of it, but just in terms of on the commercial side of things, I suppose maybe, what's the kind of cost are we talking about? And is it we'll say at this point in time viable for wide scale? Are we a bit away from that yet?
Look, I'd have to say no at this point on a commercial scale. So look, I mean, Tomas is part of the OviData project, and that's funding the genotyping. Now the key thing is that the cost of genotyping is decreasing, and it has decreased rapidly over the years. Hopefully it will continue to decrease, but at the minute, all in, including the cost of a tag, it's in the region of around 24 euros to genotype an animal. So at a commercial level, that's just not viable at the minute. Of course, there would be value to doing it, but look, the economics wouldn't stack up. On a pedigree level, look, there is a lot of value doing it, and there's a lot of subsidization going on within the pedigree scene to encourage pedigree breeders to do it. And in fairness, pedigree breeders have reacted very, very well to that, and they're engaging with it, and hopefully that will continue into the future.
I have another question for John Joe here, or for Eamon here. Sorry, John Joe asks, why can't we get more hill farmers to get star ratings on their Scottish blackface mountain sheep?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges that the Sheep Ireland program faces, and we've tried to tackle it in a couple of different directions, and we've made some good progress in certain areas of Ireland where groups have gotten involved with us. Parentage is the building block of the genetic evaluation. So we need parentage first. So you need that family tree so that when you do record information, that it matches back and you can link flocks, and it all builds up to something better. That's the one missing link in the system. Now, look, I mean, we've made steps at establishing that in different areas of the country. Perhaps a financial incentive is needed to really give it a kickstart. Ultimately, what has maybe delayed it or resulted in it stagnating is that there hasn't been a return at the market. So for the breeders that have got involved, they've been disappointed at the reaction at the market, and
and the long lead-in time as well. It's a long lead-in time before you get something out of that.
Exactly.
I have another question, which I might just put it to Anya. So Cormac asked, what's the panel's opinion? Maybe we might ask you all just to comment on it very quickly on grass-fed rams versus meal-fed. Grass-fed rams surely should rate higher in stars. Does this actually happen? So maybe I'll ask you, Anya, your take on that area. How do the evaluations work that out, grass versus meal feeding?
Yeah, so I suppose when it comes from an evaluation perspective, it doesn't actually matter if they're grass-fed or meal-fed, because when we're running our evaluations, we include these animals in something that we call a contemporary group, which essentially removes any of the management factors from the evaluation. So actually the evaluation or the breeding values that a farmer is looking at is, irrespective of whether that animal was grass-fed or meal-fed, it doesn't actually matter.
Okay. Does anybody disagree with that? No, No,
and I think to be fair, to add to that, in the Anzac flock here in Athenry, we're purchasing rams every year from breeders. So, your meal-fed ram, we also have grass-fed rams that we're letting out with our ewes, but the performance is stacking up that high genetic merit rams will outweigh low genetic merit regardless of where they've originated.
Okay. Yeah, so the system is robust.
It is, and it's back to the family tree, you know, and having that ancestry and the importance of it. So one particular flock may be heavily feeding their rams, you know, but the reality is, you know, for a particular bloodline, we're getting information from 10, 20, 30 different flocks. So all that information is combined, you know, so there's different systems in operation across all those flocks. Another key factor that farmers should know is that over 50% of our data now comes from commercial sources, you know, so it's commercial grass data. It's, you know, collected from farms like Teagasc, who isn't mollycoddling sheep, or, you know, he's trying to do the most from grass and minimize meal inputs. It also comes from our CPT, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But, you know, so a lot of the data is commercial, independently collected data, which, you know, is outside the, you know.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So look at it, earlier we caught up with Nicola Featherston. Nicola is a Welsh scholar here working on the Anzac flock, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on there. So over to Nicola.
Hello, my name is Nicola Featherston, and I'm currently in the 3rd year of my PhD with Teagasc and Rye. It's titled An Irish versus New Zealand Animal Comparison, or better known as Anzac. The project set out to compare Irish and New Zealand genetics and to most importantly validate the Sheep Ireland Replacement Index. 3 trial groups were established: New Zealand, High Irish and Low Irish. Animals were selected based on the maternal indexes of both countries, known as the New Zealand Maternal Worth and the Sheep Ireland Replacement Index. Animals in the New Zealand trial group were ranked within the top 20% of animals, or the equivalent to 5 stars on our index. High Irish and Low Irish animals are ranked within the top and bottom 20% of the animals on our national database also. So in other words, they were 5 stars or 1-star animals respectively. Each of the groups contained 2 breed types, which you'll see here, Suffolk and Texel, all of which are pedigree animals. So what have we seen from the results to date? The year starts at breeding. All ewes were artificially seminated to rams within their own trial group and their own breed. So for example, High Suffolk to High Suffolk, or New Zealand Texel to New Zealand Texel. Conception rates to first service are similar, averaging 81%, with overall barn rates at about 8% across the 3 groups after 2 repeat cycles with rams. Over the 4-year study, New Zealand ewes have had a greater scan rate than either of the Irish groups. When we look at weaning rates, New Zealand and High Irish ewes tend to wean a greater number of lambs than the Low Irish ewes. The number of lambs reared per ewe is a key driver of farm profitability, and when we look at the drop-off between the number of lambs born and the number of lambs reared across the 3 groups, while accounting for any fostering or artificially reared lambs, ewes of high genetic merit, whether of New Zealand or Irish origin, are more likely to successfully rear the lambs that they give birth to compared to the Low Irish ewes. Wouldn't we all love a ewe that gives birth and weans 2 lambs each year? Well, the chance of this happening is more likely to occur using animals of high genetic merit, regardless of their country of origin. And wouldn't we also love to have ewes that give us very few problems throughout the year? Well, we also looked at the survival rate of ewes within the 3 groups. And while we operate a strict culling protocol here in Teagasc and Rye, culling for things like age, mastitis, prolapse, lameness, just to name a few, the greater proportion of the ewes of high genetic merit, whether Irish or New Zealand, survive from 1 year to the next. I think the importance of selecting animals of high genetic merit on your farm can't be underestimated. From conceiving, delivering and rearing more lambs, to surviving longer in the flock, as well as their increased lamb performance, the benefits are clear.
So Fiona, you were working with Nicola and on the Anzac flock, and one of the things that Nicola spoke about there was that the lower genetic merit ewes were rearing fewer lambs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's something that Nicola has looked at quite closely over the last few months, and it's actually quite interesting. So there's a lot of focus on the scanned litter size from flocks around the country, and also the number of lambs the ewe gives birth to, whether they're born dead or alive. But something that we've also been looking at is the number of lambs that the ewe is weaning. So, you know, we all want a ewe that's going to give birth to multiple healthy lambs, but she also needs to be able to wean them, because if she doesn't, it means that we as farmers have to step in and, you know, there's going to be excess labour required with maybe fostering lambs or having to artificially rear lambs. And what we've seen in the Anzac flock is that the low genetic merit ewes are actually rearing 10% less lambs than the high genetic merit ewes. So these are lambs, you have to remember, that were perfectly healthy. There were no problems with them at birth. They went out to the field with the mother, but at weaning, they just weren't there. So they had been brought back in, they'd put into the artificially rearing pen. You know, the ewe just wasn't able to look after them. And that is a problem on farm.
Okay, okay. And then just look at, in addition to that, Fiona, Nicola spoke about other results from the Anzac flock. Can you go through some of those with us tonight?
Yeah, sure. So in the video, Nicola would have focused on some of the breeding and lambing traits that we were recording within the Anzac flock. But I suppose to give you a flavour of some of the other results that we're seeing, we're monitoring a lot of production traits throughout the year. And in the table that you can see here, we're looking at the New Zealand animals, the high genetic merit Irish animals, and the low genetic merit Irish animals. So we can see that high genetic merit animals, whether from Ireland or New Zealand, are producing greater estimated milk yields during lactation. They're weaning heavier lambs, and these lambs are also reaching slaughter ages earlier. So they're reaching a target slaughter age quicker than your low genetic merit lambs, which means as a farmer, you have an opportunity to sell the lambs from the farm at a younger age. Interestingly, we're also measuring the grass dry matter intake of the ewe, both during lactation and during the dry period. Now, this isn't something that's obviously routinely done on farms, but because we're in a research setting, it gives us an opportunity to do this. And if we're assuming that all of the ewes, regardless of genetic merit, are eating the same amount of grass in lactation, we can see that for each 1 kilo grass dry matter that ewe is eating, if she's a high genetic merit ewe, her lambs are actually growing faster per kilo of grass intake than a low genetic merit ewe. So you're pretty much getting more out of the ewe, you know, if she's of high genetic merit than of low genetic merit.
Get more from the same amount of input and grass. So
exactly,
she's a more profitable ewe, really. You know, that's what we're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very good, very good. Eamon, look at it. I'll come to you on this. Like, so there's a lot of work there that you're doing on this CPT program, where you've investigated kind of performance from a range of rams. Are the results that you were seeing comparable to what Fiona and Nicola have been seeing in the Anzac flock?
Yeah, Michael. Look, maybe just to give an intro to the CPT, or the Central Progeny Test. It's been running now for about 10 years. It's the only project of its kind in Europe. It's quite a unique project in that we take in rams from about 30 rams annually from pedigree flocks from all over Ireland across a number of different breeds. We mate those with 2,000 ewes, across 4 different flocks. So those flocks are then intensively performance recorded by us in Sheep Ireland. So what that enables us, and maybe it's linked to the previous question about meal feeding and grass fed versus meal fed rams. You know, the progeny of these pedigree rams, you know, are out in grass systems, and you know, we assess their performance on grass based systems. So it's a great place to, I suppose, fairly assess their performance. The CPT is a great source of commercial data feeding into the indexes, and on top of that, you know, over the years, each individual ram that's used, daughters or female progeny from those rams are retained within the project. So that's a key aspect of the project. So we get to see the maternal performance of these rams' daughters within these flocks. And we follow those for their productive life, whether it be a short one or whether it be a long one. And all that data feeds back into the indexes. When we compare high index and low index within these flocks, so there's a range of different indexes. They're not all high index animals. The high index animals are consistently outperforming the low index animals. So, you know, if you were to walk into any of these flocks and walk through the fields, you know, you would not visually, you would not identify differences in the ewes. You know, they're all similar ewes. They're a mix of different breeds. But when we look at them at an index level and follow the data through, we see very, very significant differences. We've gone further then to, you know, put financial or put costs on each of these differences for each of the different traits. And when we combine all those different gains and put an economic figure on them, we see that there's a €5 net profit difference per ewe when we compare these high index, the performance of these high index animals versus the average, so versus a 3-star ewe. So, you know, that emphasizes the huge gains that are available by consistently using 4- and 5-star rams to breed your female replacements.
Okay, yeah, very good. Anya, maybe if I bring you in there, look at it, as part of the Anzac flock, they're also recording various health traits on the animals. Do our indexes account for the variation in animal health traits?
Yeah, so the National Health Index was launched in 2017, and within that index, we include lameness for both the ewe and the lamb, And we include Teagasc, which is the accumulation of fecal material around the hindquarter of the animal. I suppose for both of them, there's economic costs, and work that I did a couple of years ago showed that we can actually, make real genetic improvements for both traits. We also included mastitis in the initial research, but unfortunately, mastitis just wasn't ready to be introduced with the other two traits in 2017. We just didn't have enough records, and we felt that we wanted to make sure that it was really, really working properly, and we had enough records to back it up year on year before we introduce it. But hopefully, when we collect more records, we can introduce it in addition to the other two traits in the future.
Yeah, that's very good. We have one question that's after coming in here, and it's a question really for Eamon. Just Senan asks, he's from Northern Ireland and is involved with farmers who have great frustration sourcing rams with performance figures here due to the lack of pedigree flock recording. Can we source Sheep Ireland rams, or are Sheep Ireland considering making rams available to farmers here? I suppose you don't really make rams available. You provide a service to ram breeders. Yeah,
we provide the service to ram breeders. So I mean, look, we're funded by the Department of Agriculture, so we're based in the Republic of Ireland. So that's the extent of our funding. So we're limited from that point of view in terms of look, there's a UK performance recording scheme that's available to UK breeders. Look, I'm aware that in Northern Ireland, I suppose the number of performance recording flocks is small. If they, if Northern Ireland breeders do wish to source rams down here, I mean,
they can export them up.
They can export them up, and I mean, look, they would have to adhere to the rules and regulations for the department. But probably the best thing to do is, there's a lot of breeders down on this side that export a lot of rams up north. Look, contact a breeder, use our ram search. Try and find some rams that you're interested in, or maybe come to some of the sales down here and look, but engage with a ram breeder about exporting them up and going through the paperwork. That's probably the best avenue.
Very good. I have time for one very, very quick question, and it's coming for Fiona. So Cormac is back asking, did Fiona see any big differences in lameness issues in New Zealand versus Irish, and the longevity of the New Zealand versus the Irish shows?
So to address the first part of that question in relation to lameness, it's not something that we've seen massive differences in to date. We are recording any incidents of lameness within the flocks, but I suppose for us, we're also routinely footbathing animals as part of our health prevention programme. And then the second part of the question was to do with the survival of the ewe within the flock. So we are actually seeing that a higher percentage of our New Zealand and our elite Irish ewes are surviving from 1 year to the next in comparison to our low genetic merit ewes. And Nicola would have alluded to that in the video.
Okay.
I might just come back in on the UK question. One criteria for exporting is that the ram is scrapie genotyped. Part of our genomics, if a pedigree ram breeder genotypes their animal through the Sheep Ireland system, they will get a scrapie genotype for their ram, and that is department approved. So look, that's probably one of the barriers maybe that's made a little bit easier now via the genomics system that is in place here now. So that should help breeders, maybe get more rams up there.
Very good. Okay, look, so I think next up we have a short video which we captured here earlier on the farm, and it's to do with our next topic, which is our portable accumulation chambers and methane emissions in sheep. So over to the video.
Here at the Anzac flock in Teagasc, Athenry, one of our roles is to investigate hard-to-measure traits and determine the influence of animal genetics on these phenotypes. One such trait that we have begun investigating is methane production from sheep production systems. Agricultural livestock production accounts for 34% of greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland, and therefore the agricultural sectors are under significant pressure to reduce methane emissions without compromising animal productivity. In conjunction with colleagues in Ag Research New Zealand, we have portable accumulation chambers which are built to measure methane production, carbon dioxide production, and oxygen consumed by the animal. The sheep enter the chamber for 50 minutes, during which time their gaseous emissions are recorded on 3 separate occasions. At entry to the chamber, 25 minutes and 50 minutes. The overall aim is to determine the impact of genetic selection on methane output and investigate the possibility of breeding a more climate-friendly animal. Initial work on validating and testing the chambers began here in autumn 2019.
as part of a Department of Agriculture funded research project. All of the animals we are measuring have data recorded on the Sheep Ireland Genetic Sheep Index and are genotyped in order to obtain their DNA information for genomic selection.
Okay, so Fiona, in the video we saw the new and innovative work that's going on in Athenry in terms of measuring methane emissions in sheep. It's something that we've all kind of heard about a lot in the news over the last couple of years in terms of climate change and stuff. You know, what are your current plans for this work? Where do you see it going?
So I suppose, you know, I guess as a view of the whole webinar, this might seem like we're changing tack a little bit, but as Anya alluded to earlier, our job from a research perspective is to investigate these new traits and to see, you know, what genetic variation is there and can the traits be impacted by the genetics of the animal. So one of the things we've started looking at here in Athenry is methane output from sheep production systems. So today there is actually a lack of data available from Irish sheep production systems in relation to methane output. And I suppose, like it or not, as farmers, it's an area that we need to become more invested in and take more interest in. As a whole, we have to be more sustainable. So it is an important topic going forward. A few years ago, you know, we would have said that health was the new fertility. And I suppose now maybe it's our greenhouse gas productions or our methane output that's probably looking into an area that I suppose we need to be investigating. So what we're doing in Athenry at the moment is we're measuring animals through our portable accumulation chambers, as you saw in the video. So we're looking at all of the life stages of the animal. So right from the growing lamb through to the pregnant, the lactating and the dry ewe, we're measuring their methane and carbon dioxide output. And what we want to do is look at the impact of production traits on the methane output of the animal. So the live weight, the diet type of the animal, whether they're eating silage during the winter period, whether they're grazing perennial ryegrass, or even some of our alternative forages, as you would have heard in our webinar last night from Dr. Philip Creighton. So we're going to look at the effect of diet type on methane output, the productivity of the animal. So, you know, if she's rearing one lamb versus maybe two lambs, how does that affect her methane output and the overall carbon footprint of the animal?
And I suppose, Fiona, going back to in terms of in relation to our national evaluations, how do you see this work fitting into this?
Yeah, so I suppose we're at the early stages at the moment. We started measuring methane output at the beginning of this year. To date, we've measured over 1,500 animals here in the flock in Athenry, and I suppose given current conditions this year, that's definitely surpassed what we expected we might have got back in the spring. So our data to date is showing us that the live weight and the diet type of the animal are two of the main factors affecting their methane output. So when we looked at the dry hoggets that we have here in Athenry, they were coming in at about 14 grams of methane per day. Whereas when you look at a heavier animal like our mature ewes during their dry phase post-weaning, their average methane outputs were about 20 grams per day. Now, importantly, from a genetics point of view, there is variation in this. So we're seeing some animals producing as low as 10 to 15 grams per day and some as low as, or some as high as 35 to 40 grams per day. So it's our job now to go away and investigate the heritability of the trait, the genetic variation behind the trait, and ultimately collect thousands of animal records that will lead to us being able to investigate this and ultimately incorporate it into our genetic index.
Okay, so maybe if I ask you, Anya, on this one, just because, you know, Fiona mentioned heritability of the trait and stuff, you know, if we're introducing a new trait like this into the index and we're trying to determine the heritability, what is that and what does it mean?
Yeah, so I suppose the heritability of a trait is the amount of variance or the genetic variance or the amount of differences that are seen in the trait that are solely due to genetics of the animal. So, you know, we have heritabilities like, you know, 30% for weaning weight, so meaning that 30% of the differences we see in weaning weight are due to genetics. We have lower heritabilities like for lameness, so 6% of the differences seen in lameness is due to genetics. For methane in New Zealand, I think it's 24% of the difference they've seen in the methane output of the animals is due to genetics. Okay. And I suppose once we have a heritability, it means that we can, you know, make these breeding improvements within the animals. But the crucial thing for a heritability and to get an accurate heritability is the number of records. So we especially for, you know, a hard to measure trait like methane, we want to have as many records as we possibly can.
Okay, but it's promising work coming from New Zealand.
Absolutely, yeah.
On this, yeah. Okay, Fiona, I have a question here. Mark asks Fiona, what role do you see the data from the pack chambers playing in helping to tackle the industry's emissions targets or goals?
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of the focus in Ireland and internationally is on, the cattle or the dairy sector, because the volume of greenhouse gas emissions from our dairy and beef animals are higher than from our sheep animals. But to date in Ireland, all we have for our sheep production systems are computer calculated output values. So it'll be nice to have some actual data that can feed back into those computer programs and allow us to see what our sheep systems are like, how sustainable they actually are versus our dairy and beef counterparts.
Okay, and one other quick question that I have here is going back probably to our previous chat, Fiona, but Brian asks, do you measure lambing difficulty and what are the figures like? That question came in when we were talking about the Anzac flock, so I assume it relates to that area. You might just give us a quick snapshot on that.
Yeah, no problem. So lambing difficulty is obviously, one of the traits that's seen as most important from a farmer's perspective. I guess understandably, we're seeing in the Anzac flock that the New Zealand animals have a much lower level of lambing difficulty than either of our Irish groups. It's not surprising genetic selection in New Zealand has been underway for the past 20 years. So they are a good, 10 to 15 years ahead of us. And with a lot of larger flocks lambing outdoors, it's something that they select quite heavily for. So if, for example, has difficulty lambing, there is no uncertain way that she's kept for the second year. I think sometimes we can be a bit lenient with some of our ewes here. We tend to forget quite easily the tough times we have in the spring.
Goes back to the recording thing again, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Look, Eamon, this is something new for us, but do you think that this information is going to benefit sheep farmers in the long run?
Look, maybe today, sheep farmers, it's not on our radar, maybe, but I mean, coming down the line, and I mean, I think we're all very aware of the focus that's on agriculture in general, and certainly livestock production systems in terms of carbon footprint and their contribution to global warming. So, look, we want to position ourselves in a good place in this area, and certainly by starting this work, we are doing that. And look, we're probably a good number of steps ahead of a lot of other countries in that regard. So, look, building towards an index that farmers can use in the future is definitely a great first step anyway.
Okay, look, we're coming towards the end, and we're just in terms of, I just want to get if you have one point you'd like to make to the audience, one final take-home message from each of your talks. I might do it in reverse order. I might take Fiona first. Fiona, what's your take-home? What message do you want people to go away with from tonight's webinar?
Yeah, so I suppose, given the time of year, a lot of our pedigree breeders have already put their ewes and lamb at this stage. As a commercial farmer, you're probably a couple of weeks away from breeding your ewes, so it's quite topical. I think we need to remember that genetics are both cumulative and permanent. So what does that actually mean? So the positive attributes that you get from breeding good genetics into your flock will last for years. But on the flip side, if you breed bad genetics into your flock, you're going to pay the price of that for years to come. And it takes a long time to breed out those poor genetics. So I think, it's important to remember the decisions we make now, while it might just seem like it's September 2020 and you're trying to bundle your rams out, they're going to have impacts on your flock for many years.
Okay, yeah. Anya, can I get one key message from you?
Yeah, so I suppose for me, as a researcher, performance recording is really, really important. So without any of those records, we can't, make these, we can't investigate, any of those new traits. We can't make improvements on traits that we already have a lot of information on. And I suppose from a farmer's point of view, by performance recording, even a small bit, even a subset of the flock means that you're identifying those, animals that are both good and bad. From a pedigree breeder perspective, I suppose, Eamon alluded to it earlier, that just because we have the genomic technology in now, doesn't mean that we can stop performance recording. We're always going to need, measurements. We're always going to need extra weights coming in.
Okay. And Eamon, yourself, what's your take-home message for people, to the viewers tonight? Yeah, look, so for me, I just want every flock to be aware of the future direction of your flock, and ultimately your flock profitability is, dictated by those animals you're bringing into your flock. So that ram purchase decision that you're making. So look, farmers have the choice. They can roll the dice and, buy a ram, without any additional information behind that ram. Or they can, use the information that's available, the Eurostar indexes, and put themselves in the best possible chance of, making a more profitable future for their sheep flock. Yeah. Look, I think in summary, you know, it's very clear that there's an awful lot of work going on and an awful lot of research going into this area of breeding and genetics. It's an exciting time to see all these new technologies that are available, are coming available, and are coming downstream. And these are really the technologies that you, the sheep farmers, can use, and they're going to make your flock more productive, more resistant to disease, easierly managed, and also more profitable. And look, I think that's the important message. You know, there's lots of info out there. Use it. I'd like to thank our panelists, Eamon Wall from Sheep Ireland, Dr. Anya O'Brien from Teagasc, based in Moore Park, and Dr. Fiona Mcgovern, based here in Athenry. I'd like to thank our IT and filming people here, Declan McCardle and Trish, for all their help in terms of putting stuff together, all the video clips that have been put together, all the social media outputs, and for filming and recording and broadcasting here tonight. I'd like to thank our people in PR in HQ for all the work that they've been doing in terms of getting Sheep Week up and running and getting it out there to you and all the media outputs that are going out during the day. I'd like to thank our team, the sheep team here, for all the work in terms of getting this together, and also our advisors across the country who have helped us make this virtual Sheep Week happen, and will continue to make it happen until Friday, which is our last day. I'd also just again like to mention our sponsor, FBD Insurance, who are sponsoring this week for us. I'd like to remind you all to tune in same time, same place next week, or sorry, tomorrow, for our Hill Sheep and our Store Lamb webinar that's taking place here at 7 o'clock. So good night, everybody.